Because I believe in truthful advertising, I should mention that in a previous life, I was a presidential speechwriter in the Clinton White House. So tonight, beyond being a bookseller, an independent bookseller, I'm especially personally delighted and honored to host my old boss, Bill Clinton, along with James Patterson for a discussion of their brand new, hot off the presses political thriller, The President is Missing. Now, I'm sure you've seen that it's getting rave reviews already, and when you read it, you'll undoubtedly find yourself glued to every page from start to finish. It is just, well, it's terrifying, but it is also a very, very fun read, and especially coming from a former president himself and one of the great authors. Now, everyone knows that Bill Clinton served 2 terms as president of the United States, right? But you may not know, feel free to applaud. You can feel a wave of nostalgia building. But you may not know how much time he spends with books, reading them, writing them, thinking about them, even organizing them. More than a few of his friends have experienced President Clinton arriving in their home libraries and promptly rearranging the books on their shelves. Now, Mr. President, if you can hear me, we have about 60,000 books at Politics and Prose, and you are welcome to come over anytime and put them in whatever order and sequence you think works best. So anytime, please come over. And those of us who were privileged enough to serve in the White House with President Clinton, and there are quite a few Clinton alums here in the audience tonight, would often spot the president walking through the West Wing with books tucked under his arm. And he averaged about 4 or 5 books a week. That was his average consumption of books while also doing a lot of other heavy lifting for our country. How many of you, speaking of which, had a chance to read or see the By the Book interview with President Clinton in the New York Times Sunday book review last week? Anybody see it? Yeah? Okay. Well, if you did read it, you will appreciate that his taste in books is serious, voracious, and vast, from history to literary fiction, mysteries, current affairs, biography, philosophy, poetry, and I could go on and on. Imagine that, a president who reads. Those were the days. Before publishing The President is Missing, President Clinton had written more than a few best-selling books of his own, but this latest work is his first foray into fiction. He studied extensively about cyber warfare to write it, and of course he relied on something that he knows more about than almost anyone on the planet: what it's actually like to be president of the United States when your country is threatened with attack. Now, to create a fictional account, well, we hope it remains fictional, he teamed up with America's most successful author, the incomparable James Patterson. It would truly take all night to enumerate Mr. Patterson's contributions to the literary canon, but to summarize briefly, he has written more New York Times #1 bestsellers than anyone in history. He has sold 350 million copies of his books worldwide. His books have been made into dozens of television shows and movies. His most famous characters, such as detectives Alex Cross and Michael Bennett, among others, are household names. Mr. Patterson has even been a category, not just one question answer, but an entire category on Jeopardy! And his publishing successes have been a case study at the Harvard Business School. But here's one other really, really important thing about James Patterson. As successful and prolific as he is as an author, he is equally so as a philanthropist, as a defender of core American values, as a fierce and unwavering champion of reading and writing, teaching and learning, civic engagement, and civic discourse. James Patterson has established generous funds and grants to support students, teachers, reading initiatives, public libraries, colleges and universities, independent bookstores and independent booksellers, and has contributed millions of free books to children across our country and to U.S. servicemen and women deployed overseas. And for all of that, I hope you will join me in thanking James Patterson for those immense civic contributions. Moderating tonight's conversation will be an old friend and colleague of President Clinton's, Paul Begala. Paul was one of the brilliant strategists leading the successful Clinton presidential campaign in 1992. He worked for President Clinton after that in various capacities, including at the White House. He now teaches public policy at Georgetown University and is a political commentator on CNN. And by the way, for those of us who know him, he's just one of the smartest, nicest, and most decent guys in the world, and we are delighted to have him with us tonight as well. And with that, please join me in welcoming the 42nd President of the United States, Bill Clinton, James Patterson, and Paul Begala.
Thank you. Lissa,
Let's get it on.
Let's get it on. Lissa, thank you. You and Brad at Politics and Prose and what you've done for authors, for readers, for independent booksellers. So thank you so much and for hosting us. And please do. It turns out that people who go to independent booksellers are independent thinkers, and I like that. So thank you, Lissa and Brad, for what you do for us. I kind of feel like we had to just dive straight into it, because I know there's a hockey game in a little while.
No caps.
And I feel like I'm sitting like with Bobby Orr and Wayne Gretzky. So let me, or maybe actually like with Wayne Gretzky and Hank Aaron. Because you guys come from different disciplines. And I do know that the person who first put you together to do this project is our mutual friend and lawyer Bob Barnett, greatest lawyer in the world, kept my ass out of prison for 20 years. No easy task. So how did that work? Who made the call first, and who set up this collaboration?
Barnett called me one day and he said, "Look, I've been trying for years to get you to write a mystery. You love these thrillers, you gorge on them. I don't know if you have time to do anything else, but you won't quit what you're doing enough to do it. So why don't you do one with James Patterson?" I said, "Oh, he'll never do that." I said, "What can I do for him? He's the best-selling author in the world. Why does he need me?"
Because he'd run a mystery.
So he called Patterson, and in a moment of abject foolishness, he said he'd be interested in doing it. And we met and clicked, and we agreed that we needed to try to write something that was faithful to the presidency and the way the government actually works, or did work. And the procedures, no. You have to admit the procedures are slightly different now. And that dealt with a real security challenge that could actually go haywire. And that we would be authentic. We'd make it as exciting as we could without letting the underlying core of the issue go wacky. Then he thought it'd be neat to have the president go missing. Most people who've been president think it might be a neat thing.
You think that's a good idea?
Yeah, I saw the headline, and I was a little disappointed it was fiction, sir. But it's a joke.
If there's any press here, just make sure you get the attribution of that quote right.
Well, so Jim, you get the call?
I got the call from Bob Barnett too, and I grew up we both grew up in small towns, and nobody ever came to my small town except when I was 8 or 9. President Eisenhower came, and I never got closer than 300 or 400 feet, but I never forgot that, never forgot it, and I also tried to never forget where I came from and never get a big head about anything that happened or didn't happen in my life. So the opportunity of writing a book with President Clinton was overwhelming to me, and the idea of spending a year with him, which is what we've done, writing this book together.
So, but like mechanically, then I don't want to get too much into the process, but like.
Are you ready?
You alternate
we
words?
alternated words.
But you don't alternate paragraphs or chapters or. So did you send? You don't sit across a table from each other, though, right? Do you send
we
him?
did on
chapters?
occasion, mostly just. I had a lot of questions, and then the president had some questions, as we interchanged pages. But sometimes we got together, sometimes we just sent pages back and forth. The first 2 chapters, I would say we did 6 drafts on the first 2 chapters.
Wow.
Yeah.
To make it, I don't want to spoil it for anybody, but the book opens with a scene that's painfully reminiscent of many congressional hearings. And that was, I guess, something you wanted to relive, sir?
No, actually, you'll see it's Patterson at his best. I wish I could take credit for it. It was his idea to open there. You got to have a good opening in these things, right? And so my job was to keep it real. Mm-hmm. And the difference, it deals with the potential of the president being impeached, but the difference is, in this case, this president says, if I did what they accuse me of doing, for any of the reasons they accuse me of doing it, it is an impeachable offense and I ought to be impeached and removed from office. I didn't, but I can't tell them, because if I tell them, they'll blab, and I don't trust them not to blab, and it could put the country at mortal risk. And it's the first example of what happens when you become so polarized nobody trusts anybody anymore.
One thing, we had a little bit of fun initially. There's nothing, in terms of, tonight, there was nothing political in this book. We really did not set out to be political. And I would say that in the year that we've been together, I think the president has come up twice. I mean, so this isn't a political, but what it is about, and I think one of the important things that we agreed upon is, for 20 or 30 years now, most of what you hear about the president, Saturday Night Live, Colbert, Scandal, House of Cards, whatever.
The TV show, not the real.
Yeah, no, people start diminishing the idea of how important that job is. And one of the things we wanted to remind people of, and we wanted to create a president where people would remember how important that job is, how tense it is, how dramatic it is, how dangerous it is, and that when they go in to elect a president, or in the midterms to elect Congress people, and I'm not being political here, but you just remember how important that is when you cast your vote. It's really important. It's a serious job, serious people. Most of the people in Congress and the people, whatever side of the aisle they're on, they want to do a good job. They want to do a good job.
So, sir, what were you trying to accomplish?
That I wanted people to remember that it is a job. And no offense to your current life, in which you've done a great job and been wildly successful, but it is possible in today's media-drenched world for people just to draw all their conclusions based on very quick snippets on the news. And they say that we're down to the president. Even if you're president, you get an average of like 8 seconds at a time, and that's about our attention span, which is, if that's true, it's troubling, because butterflies have a 9-second attention span. But you get the idea. The truth is that what we run the risk of doing is either loving or despising a cartoon. And people and problems and opportunities tend to be three-dimensional. So what we try to do is make this really exciting. Use the fiction vehicle to make it exciting. You'll have to decide if you agree with that. But make it about something real. In this case, cybersecurity, because first of all, for reasons you'll find out if you read the book, it's really the only credible scenario in which the president would go missing. You can't think of another security threat which would require the president to go missing. If you read the book, you'll figure that out. And I just want, and we wanted to raise this issue because I think, it's all this coverage now about the Russians interfered in the election, who knew what, when, did it make a difference? And now James Clapper, who was President Obama's director of national intelligence, isn't that right?
Yes, sir.
That was his job. He and a few others have now concluded that they think the Russians did influence enough votes or miscount or whatever the heck they did. He knows more about it than I do, to change the election. And apparently they're going to say that. But here's what I found. Whether people think that's a bad or a good thing depends on who they voted for. And that's a very bad thing. Because we all have bank accounts. We all need to be able to get to a hospital that works when we're sick. You name it. We all need the lights to come on. And so I think it's a very hazardous thing for us not to care if we're infinitely hackable.
I mean, one of the threat in this book is that the lights will go out, that the bank accounts that the Wall Street will go down, and it will be erased. So whatever your money, it's gone. Your Wall Street, it's gone. Your stocks are gone. So that's the threat here in this book. So it goes beyond what's going on with the hacking during the election.
Well, so Jim, you have earned almost a permanent place in the New York Times bestsellers. You're number 6 this week with your previous book. And you've already got a new one coming out, which I think will debut very highly on that list as well.
I think so.
So, but I just curious.
Hope so. I don't know what I think.
Oh, no, we're there already.
I mean,
we could get there number 1 based on the first day sales.
It's fantastic. This thing is taking off like a rocket, which I think is wonderful. It's a hell of a book. But for you, you're beloved by everyone. And when you associate with even a president, you run the risk of choosing sides. So we're the most polarized I think we've been in my lifetime. And so was there some concern that writing...
I could never think that way. I've always tried to do the right thing as I understand it. When you start a project, to me the key, and whether it's Congress or writing a book, what I'd like to see happen is that you have mutual respect, and then you listen. It's that simple. I did a book with a Swedish writer at one point, and the same thing. We just respected one another as writers, and we listened to one another, and that's pretty much what happened here. There were never. I mean, this is an interesting thing for you to get into because you've written stuff for the president. We never had a disagreement ever, not one. Yeah.
I wish I could say that. I have. I don't know if you remember this, sir. I have one of my prized possessions, and I know Bruce Reed is here. He and I traveled with the president and wrote speeches for him on the plane. And in 1992, he and I wrote a speech. It was magnificent. I got it back from the then governor, and every single line was meticulously crossed out. Each line, not just a big X through the page, saying, hey, Bruce and Paul, you can do better. Just each line carefully excised and then rewritten in. So this is a really tough guy to write with and for. And
well,
yet,
but the point is, I didn't know how to turn wait. We worked together on this. We reached consensus. He is a genius you'll see this about 5 times in the book. You think you know exactly what's happening, and then the car turns, and it's brilliant. And I just tried to I know who this president is. Mm-hmm. This guy's a governor of North Carolina, fought in the first Gulf War, 20 years younger than me. Well, I know this guy. He grew up like I did. I know his voice. I tried to make it authentic and to make sure, and Jim sent me literally, he was so determined, after we agreed on the outline, he literally sent me 20 questions.
Wow.
I felt like I was in school. I had to write an essay on here are these 20 things we have to resolve before we can do one more thing. So some of them I can answer off the top of my head. Others I had to do my own research on.
That was probably the closest. It wasn't a disagreement, but there was one question, and a couple of weeks later I went back and I asked a question, and he said, well, I already answered that. And I said, well, you didn't answer it well enough.
Oh!
That's the only, that was the only little.
But it was a wonderful experience, and I learned a lot, I just learned a lot. I felt like I should be paying somebody else.
And he's a terrific storyteller. At one point over the holidays, he sent me a Christmas gift, and it was speeches that he'd done for funerals, which when I initially got it, I went like, I don't know about this. But I got to tell you, they're wonderful, wonderful, wonderful speeches. They're fabulous. He really, I know. I didn't actually know what to make of it when I initially got it.
But my president knows what to make of it, this president in the book. I grew up in a culture where people were entitled to respect and where their story should be told at the funeral. I grew up being taught that everybody's got a story, but not everyone can tell it. And when their life's done, somebody ought to stand up and tell it in a way that brings dignity and meaning to their life. So it's the only time I've done this in 19 years. I send a speech book every year. This one I just picked famous people like Helmut Kohl and people you never heard of that I thought were pretty great. And put them out.
One of the things that the president really helped with tremendously and made me a better writer is just keep putting more flesh and blood on the characters. The president, even the sniper, which initially I think the sniper was sort of a typical thriller character that you go along with it, but you didn't feel who the human being was, and the president, with that character.
Yeah, if you read the book, it was his idea to have the female sniper's code name is Bach, and she loves Bach, and you'll understand why when you read it. And I thought she was so fascinating, and I said, Jim, we got to do more with this person. And I saw the reviewers and our fellow mystery writers have been uncommonly kind to us, and I'm very grateful. But one person who's a really respected and smart person said, there's just some of this stuff that's not believable, like this assassin, come on, give me a break. And with all respect, I know more about that than the reviewer does. That is, the Balkan Wars that I lived through and tried to end in Bosnia and Kosovo produced a level of horror in tens of thousands of people that is almost impossible to describe. So when you think of this woman, I want you to think, if you read this book and say, what in God's name did we let all that go on as long as we did for? And think about it happened in Rwanda, and think about it happens in other places. You can't have a situation where people can kill, rape, and pillage at will without having deep scars that twist otherwise good and brilliant people into dark places that they can't ever figure out how to get out of. So that's what we try to do.
I thought it was really amazing and very brave to have a terrorist depicted so fully, so complicated, so human. And is there some risk in that? Because, right, we are threatened by terrorists, and it's kind of easy and maybe even useful for those of us who are threatened by them to dehumanize them so then we can go and kill them. But this woman, and some of the other terrorists in the book, they really have a backstory.
Yeah, there are three terrorists, and they're all, I think, two of the three are very human. One, something happens, and
We don't want to spoil it.
Yeah, but no, I think it is useful, and I think at the end of the book it's useful that people care about what happens to that sniper, which I think that's the way it ought to be. I mean, one of the masters, and somebody who got me, I was a literary snob, Vanderbilt, PhD candidate, whatever, and I read Day of the Jackal, and I went, ooh, this is, and he was brilliant because he got you caring about the jackal. Right. Who was the villain in the book, and you were going, oh, don't let anything bad happen to the jackal.
Well, I also think it's better for our national security.
Really? Because
one of the things that gets you into bad decision making is dehumanizing and underestimating your adversaries. I became fascinated with Osama bin Laden in the early 90s when I did my exit interview with President George W. Bush when he was coming in. You always do that little, like handing a baton off. And I said, I know that you believe Saddam Hussein is the biggest security threat facing his country, but I promise you Osama bin Laden is. And I said, and this whole idea of non-state actors who can work with governments that don't like us or work on their own and all this technology stuff. And I said, this guy is so smart. And he comes from the richest family in Saudi Arabia. He could have lived a cushy and hypocritical life, and instead he's living in a cave somewhere and has to have dialysis. So he believes in what he's doing, better to respect your adversaries if you want to defeat them. And it's something we would all do well to keep in mind in any of life's great contests, because if the resources are fairly evenly distributed, then it becomes a head game. And so, yeah, we did. We made him a person, but I also think for people we made her a person in this book. But I think in general, you should do that with your adversaries.
Well, may I ask you about the hero? William Jefferson Clinton helps create Jonathan Lincoln Duncan. Is that you?
No. No, the guy is first of all, he's a generation younger. He's a Gulf War veteran. He's been tortured, captured and tortured. He had a wonderful, brilliant wife who tragically died young. He is the father of one daughter. That's one thing we got in common. And he loves her more than life, and he's scared to death something's going to happen to her and all this. But he's different from me, but he's a good president. That is, he shows up for work every day with an attitude that he needs to try to make something happen. He also was governing in a very polarized environment, and he tries to figure out how to make it work. But we worked on this. You know, we tried to make the voice authentic. But he's not me, he's him.
Well, and also and to create a president who would begin to, at least in people's minds, get away from the cynicism that, and I'm not talking once again about the current situation, but just in general, the cynicism about government and the potential, the hopefulness that we can move on to a more perfect union. More perfect union means we have to be together, not that we're apart.
Well, and so you take this very realistic president with the best possible insight into what the job is like, and you, though, come up with the initial insight. I want the president to go missing. First off, what made you think of that? How do you come to that?
I think if we didn't do that, it just wouldn't be a very interesting thriller. You know? But that was the notion, and I mean, we could have gone somewhere else, and we talked about it a lot. That just seemed like that's the kind of thing you can build a thriller around, and there could have been other things, but that seemed like a real good one.
But I think you'll find that it's credible why he goes missing.
Right.
From everybody briefly, and then missing from public view and press access, where nobody knows where he is for most of the novel. I think, and you'll see why.
He said that it would be irresponsible under most circumstances for the president ever consider something like that. But in terms of what goes on in this book, which is essentially the 4 worst days any president has ever experienced, under those circumstances, the idea of him going missing it made sense.
Well, one of the things I love as a former White House staffer is how you all treat the Secret Service. I wear their pin. They gave me this pin when I left the White House 18 years ago, and I wear it every single day, and I wear it on TV. It's not only our flag, but it's a Secret Service logo, because those men and women risk their lives in ways that most people will never, ever know. Mr. President, you know better than anybody. Did you talk to...
I do have a question, though. You guys are here. Am I like, you going to help me, too, if I'm like... I'm just curious.
Those guys, did you talk to Larry Cockle or Lou Merletti or Brian Stafford or any of the guys who were like inches from you through your whole presidency and ready to step in front of a bullet for you?
No, because what they were doing here, I knew enough about it from vivid memories. I just cringed every time the Secret Service gets bad publicity. And sometimes, somebody screws up and they deserve it, but 99% of the time, they get up every day and they go about their business, and I watch them, and I'm not as high value target as I used to be, but I watch these men and women day in and day out when I follow my routines and try to stay busy and try to do things, work themselves, force themselves to concentrate and imagine what they have to be on the alert for, what they might have to do if something bad goes wrong. And And when I was president, I remember when bin Laden put out a fatwa on me, and there was a serious threat that there would be an attack in Pakistan or Bangladesh. It was awful. And I said, you know, we went in an unmarked plane into Bangladesh, and I said, you know, I don't want anybody with young children going with me. But the sad thing was there were people even younger going. I mean, it's not you just take it for granted that nobody's going to try to kill the president or nothing terrible is going to happen. But this is it is kind of a love letter to the Secret Service, and anybody like you that was ever around them, I think pretty much feel the way I do.
Yeah, they are remarkable. I think it's terrific that you shine a light on that in this book. And yet, it's not perfect. The president, I don't want to, but the president is at some risk, Jim. And I have to say, having ridden around in those convoys, it's to my mind highly plausible. I mean, it could actually happen, and I think it's a real tribute. Jim,
yeah, I mean, anything that happens in the book, as I said, you know, whether it's this very dramatic potential for a cyber attack or an attack on a motorcade, if it happened, this is the way it could happen, which I think makes everything particularly interesting, and I think that's why the reviews and authors who we've sent it to. And it's interesting because we talked to a couple of the authors. We had Lee Child last night. And he gave us a really terrific, he's a wonderful guy, came all the way from Wyoming to see us last night. But he said when he got the book, when they sent it to him, he's like, oh, Jesus, what if I don't like it? You know? But he liked it, thank God.
So let's talk about the threat. That's in many ways, I think the characters are phenomenal. The plot is eye-popping, and Mr. President, I know you worked very hard to get the terrorist threat right, and if you could tell folks who haven't read it yet, what's the threat, why did you choose it, and how did you make it so realistic?
Well, first of all, it's a cyber threat, and I think, as I said, for reasons, the most sweeping cyber attack ever launched on the United States that would basically take down everything and the backup systems. And I wanted to do it because first, just as a matter of plot, it would be hard, as you'll see if you read it, it would be hard to justify the president going missing except under the circumstances in which he boots the Secret Service altogether for a few hours, which drives them nuts, as you'll see, for good reason. And secondly, I think it's underappreciated still. As I said, you know, you see all this coverage on Russian hacking and how upset people are. It's been my experience. It depends almost entirely on how they voted. And they act like, and even a lot of people that voted for Hillary say, well, the economy's working around, the country didn't fall, why should I care about this? You should care a lot. Keep in mind, the State Department computers and the Defense Department computers were both hacked in President Obama's second term by both Russia and China. The Chinese did it to get the intelligence and never tried to weaponize it in our politics. But this should really bother you because just about anything that works electronically can be hacked, and even more. You'll see, we try to describe what could happen in a worst case scenario because I don't think our country has done enough for it. As I said, over 20 years ago, I issued the first executive order, and Richard Clark, who was working in counterterrorism then, is here, and he's somebody that I want to thank him. We thank him in the book, but I read his books, I read Ted Koppel's books, I looked in 3 or 4 others, and I talked to a bunch of people to try to figure out how to put this together. And we had a lot of help because we did not want to screw the technology up. And I just think it's crazy. I mean, what's our defense budget? Well over $500 billion.
$700 billion defense budget this year. 18.
Okay, we spent, according to the latest government figures I could get, $15 billion on cybersecurity.
You know, one of the funny things about, we really did a lot of research, and the president did read a lot, and really reached out to some people who really know what they're doing. And then one of the reviewers said that we didn't know what we were talking about, which is so weird. I'm just wondering, like, who did the reviewer talk to, you know?
Somebody in Russia.
Well,
it's not just, and it's just not in public money. We have some great cybersecurity companies here in the D.C. area, in Northern Virginia. But in several of the last few years, the Israelis have gotten as much as 1/2 of all the private capital in the world invested in cybersecurity. And you'll see that manifest in this book too. And they're very good at cyber defense. The Germans are quite good at it because they've been exposed to mostly the Russians a lot. But we should be putting this on the front burner.
well, in fact, here is what the president says. Terrorism has a new face. Today, terrorists take advantage of greater openness and the explosion of information and weapons technology. The new technologies of terror and their increasing availability, along with increasing mobility of terrorists, raise chilling prospects of vulnerability. This is a threat to all humankind. Mr. President, you said that in September of 1998.
The president in the book says this.
He said that in September of 1998. You went to the United Nations and told the whole world that technology and terrorism were going to marry up and be a threat to all of humankind. It probably doesn't feel very good to be so right, does it?
No, but look, throughout all of the history of conflict, offense precedes defense, right? Somebody figures out how to tie a stick and a stone together, and they've got a hatchet, and they hit you over the head. You figure out how to stretch animal skins over 2 stones. You got a shield. From that day to this, offense precedes defense. Then came the nuclear age. We could all be exterminated. So we developed the mutually assured destruction strategy. Our best defense was, it's not worth it trying to kill them because we'll die too. And now you've got something where you really need to prevent most attacks. And if you can't prevent them because things happen so fast, you need to try to move the defense to activate a nanosecond after the offense. And you may even have to, we may need artificial intelligence both to create that kind of instantaneous defense. And of course, it will also create instantaneous offenses. This is a part of the modern world. You've got to get ready for it. But at least you need to know that we suit up, we're sensitive, and we're putting everything on the line. And so that's, anyway.
And it's our hope that, in a small way, this book will be some offense that will stimulate people around the country to write to their congresspeople, stimulate the president, et cetera, to deal with some defense.
This is not, it's not a partisan issue. I'm telling you, I don't know why. You're probably going to ask me about the NSC. I have no idea why Mr. Bolton got rid of the cybersecurity person. It may or may not have anything to do with downgrading the threat. It may be that he thinks the Defense Department should handle it, or there may be. I'm not criticizing anybody, but it would have been good to have an explanation when it was done.
What he said was
huge deal.
Cybersecurity was now marbled throughout all the facets of the National Security Council, so we don't need a senior cybersecurity coordinator. What do you think of that?
I like to have one person who's responsible. Mm-hmm. I like coordination. I think creative networks make better decisions than lone geniuses. And I think diverse creative networks make better decisions than homogenous ones. But you got to have somebody who's in charge, somebody who's driving the agenda, somebody who's personally responsible to keep pushing the ball forward, I think. But maybe, like I said, maybe it's really being done somewhere by somebody else, maybe by somebody they don't want to be identified. All I'm telling you is that this is crazy, but this may be the one time you get a chance to read a Cheap Thrills mystery with the goal of raising your consciousness, your knowledge level, and hoping that as a citizen, whatever your political party, you'll lobby for us to do more in this area. I think there's almost no way for us to do enough to try to be on the forefront of this.
I mean, one of the things last week we had. Last week we did 3 or 4 days with the foreign press, and everybody we talked to, the Germans, Israelis, the people from England, et cetera, they all agreed that this is something we should all be working on around the world, because it's in everybody's interest to be able to develop a defense against what's possible.
Yeah, that's another thing. It really would matter if we could have some treaties and some cooperative pacts, even though some of the best hackers in the world are obviously non-state actors that may or may not be hired by people who wish us ill, but we got to kind of keep going. And we're just, and also everybody, even not in the federal government, Terry McAuliffe took, before he left office as governor of Virginia, sent his election expert with one of his voting machines to the annual convention of computer hackers in Las Vegas. It took them 6 minutes to hack the machine.
Wow.
After which they said if they had just a couple more minutes, they could adjust the votes on any race on the machine, on any referendum on the machine, in a way that make it almost impossible to determine that it had been done. And so
what did he do?
Went to paper ballots. And let me say, Canada's been on paper ballots for years, and they count their ballots as quick as we do. India has the next best system where it's electronic, but they go to the central wherever in repository in Delhi, but there's a copy immediately made in paper there at every voting place. And a few years ago when the Congress Party won, upsetting the BJP, that's Mr. Modi's party that's back in power now, no one could figure it out because the BJP had produced 9% growth 3 years in a row, and they got beat. There was never any controversy about the election because they could double check all the votes. There was a rule, and they felt comfortable. We could all live with it. In this Virginia case, you guys probably followed that. They had 4 state legislative races that were tight as a tick, and one of them, the only one that was controversial, was the one that went into court. Because they knew. But only 2 states apparently have tried to access the technology office federal government provides to help states secure elections. So, I mean, this is it's like we don't want to think about it or something.
And Jim, in addition to elections, which we have now had some experience with people at least trying foreign powers to hack and affect, you mentioned a moment ago about people's entire life savings. I don't know if you're free to tell the audience who hasn't read the book yet the name of this terror attack and what that means and what we could possibly face.
Yeah, I mean, the name of the terror attack is Dark Ages. And that's essentially what's possible. It could throw, at least for months conceivably, it could throw the United States back into the Dark Ages.
So no electricity.
We would be now, presumably some of our, we would get protected by certain countries around the world because it's not in their interest that we disappear. But
But everything is connected. Everything is.
Yeah, it used to be
online.
electricity. Now it's the internet. I mean, everything, pretty much everything. You just think it through.
Well, for example, you could say we have, these big grids in the east and west coast, little in the middle. They say, oh yeah, you could take it down, but we'll bring it right back up. But if you had a virus that got into the backup system, it wouldn't. And if you simultaneously fried all the transformers so that they all had to be replaced before you could do it, you could keep electricity down for a long time.
So decades ago, Albert Einstein said the fourth...
A little cash and some gold around your house. Just
right.
In case,
Well, Einstein said the fourth world war will be fought with sticks and stones. And he was right. Isn't that, I mean, if it's going to be the Dark Ages, if and when we get this sort of attack, So people won't, they'll lose all of their wealth.
I mean, hopefully we'll deal with it. I mean, that's really what we're trying to do. We're trying to get people to deal with it now.
And there's if you look at, we at least when it comes to national defense, we try to show you how you might dodge that bullet if you knew even a couple of weeks before that, if you had any intelligence. But this is a really serious thing. And I don't want you to be terrified. I want you to be good citizens and say, why in the living daylights aren't we investing more per capita on this than any other country in the world? This is the home of Silicon Valley. We've given birth to this massive IT revolution. Why does Israel get more private capital investment in cyber defense than we do? I mean, the Israelis need cyber defense, but I'm not, and you'll see that in the book. But I really think this is something, I'm probably making a bunch of guys in Northern Virginia a ton of money tonight, but I really...
They're buying a little stock, you know, whatever.
I honestly don't think we've done enough. I also have always believed, since 9/11, I remember I ran into the late Tom Clancy, whose politics were about as opposite of mine as could be. And I said, Tom, I got an idea for you. You need to serve your country one more time. He said, why makes you think that? I said, because a couple of years before 9/11, you wrote a novel in which an adversary flew a jet airplane right into the Capitol dome. And what we're going to do with this 9/11 commission, if we're not careful, is make sure 9/11 can't happen again. And what we really need is to realize that our adversaries are already start thinking about what the next opportunity is. How would you do the next thing? And you're good at this. You make a living doing it. And I didn't think about Jim then, or out of press, I would have drafted him into action.
I came out of a business originally, advertising, although I've been clean for over 20 years, where creativity is really at the heart of the business, or it's very important. And unfortunately, in a lot of corporations and in the government, creativity is not necessarily a piece of imagination, is not a piece of the puzzle, and it needs to be. Right. You know, what the president was talking about there with Clancy, just it's people who are creative, who just imagine things, and we're not. We tend not to do that. Even newspapers, I think there's a need for a lot more creativity with the media. They should be thinking things through imaginatively, not just reporting on what happened. It's what could happen.
Right. Mr. President, I want to pull a thread. You mentioned our friends in Israel. And I do happen to know, at least used to be, your favorite movie was High Noon. Well, I love that because it's Gary Cooper, one man alone, standing in a dusty street. Your own style of leadership and the leadership this president shows is actually not at all Gary Cooper and High Noon. It's very collaborative. And I think that's unusual, I think, for a presidential mystery to have that sort of collaborative leadership. I don't want to give too much away, but you've sort of hinted that perhaps our friends in Israel help us out, and they do. Were you trying to say something there, not about politics, but about life and how you view leadership?
First of all, with complex problems capable of morphing before your very eyes while you're dealing with them, I'll say again, the creative cooperation should be the strategy. You should get the smartest people you can who have different knowledge bases and different skills, maybe even different ways of thinking, and get them together working on a problem. That they work better, they make better decisions. And the more diverse they are, the better the decisions will be over time. A lot of people are worried, you know, there are all these books. Madeleine Albright's got this fabulous book out on Fascism, A Warning. They may be really smart on the way up, but in the world we're living in, that is a terrible way to run a railroad. Because you can't make good decisions. There's just too much to know, happening too fast in too many places. The best chance you got is to put together a team and make it a team sport.
And that's the only way this could be realistic. We always try to keep it realistic, and that's the only solution here that, you know, in terms of this book being realistic.
I just think it's terrific that in this heroic context, you know, where the president is striking out alone, even going missing from the White House, the impetus to be collaborative is essential.
Yeah, well, this when the president was talking about having somebody in charge.
Right.
The president is in charge, but when you're in charge in this day and age, you have to get the best people in the world working with you.
He has to go missing so he can trigger the defense. Mm-hmm. I can tell you that much about the plot.
Well,
if he's got to, in other words, before you can put a team together, they have to know what the heck they're doing, right? You don't say, sit in the room and I'll bring you a hamburger and think about the sky. So it makes sense, but in the end, the idea that this guy could have defeated this threat alone is insane. And that's another thing, who works for you, what they know, what they bring to the table, and how free they feel to be honest and to take chances. That's really important.
There are a lot of books written about the president, a lot of nonfiction, memoirs, etc. I don't think you'll find a book where you will feel what it's like to be president that works any better than this one. One of the advantages that we had in doing this book versus a memoir, when you write a memoir, you can't tell everything. There's a lot of stuff that you just can't talk about. Because this is all theoretical, we could talk about pretty much anything. So you really do get a feeling for, okay, this is what it's like to be a president, to be the president of the United States.
And this president surrounds himself with strong advisors, an enormous number of whom are women. You've created some really powerful women characters. We talked about the sniper being one, and she's really complex and interesting. And the vice president is a woman, the chief of staff. Most of the key
head of the FBI.
The head of the FBI. Most of the key figures are strong women. I have a rough idea, sir, where you get inspiration for that. And Jim, you created the Women's Murder Club. I mean, this is kind of a trademark of yours as well, and the rest of you.
And my wife is a very strong woman, too.
And a world-class athlete and a better golfer than either one of us.
Yeah, well, there's that. Yeah.
That was clearly intentional.
4-time All-American. What a girl. But for me, even more than that, I grew up in a house full of women. Mother, grandmother, 3 sisters, female cat. And the buzz and the purr is still in my head. I mean, seriously, it really is. And it's always driven me all through life. So.
I think, look, even in America, we're doing better than most countries, but not than all. Even in America, women are subject to presumptions about what they can and can't do, or what they will or will not do. We need more women role models in every step, because we see starting at about the 5th grade, women, young girls are through 10 or 11 are just as interested in math and science as boys are. And then, kind of social patterns tend to take them one way or the other. That's fine. I want them to be free to do whatever they want. But in this novel, you've got an African-American woman, FBI director, who got the job because she was the best person for the job. You've got a black South African female doctor who saves the president's life because he's got a health condition that she knows more about managing than anybody else, at least in the D.C. area. And you got a lot of other women in there. You got a vice president that's still half mad that he beat her for the nomination.
That is fiction.
Yeah. And, so you're going to spend half this novel wondering if she's good or bad. But you don't doubt that she's tough and smart and super qualified.
Well, and complicated. These are really
complicated people. And they're not all good. They're not all bad. They're real live.
Right. My other big passion project right now is I was approached by the Einstein estate to go around the world and create a character who would turn little kids on to Einstein and his theories. And they're very smart, and they said, but it has to be entertaining, otherwise little kids are, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 years old will not read it. And all they gave me was the name Max Einstein, And when I went back to them, I said, I got it, and you don't have to do, but if I'm going to create this, I want Max to be a girl. For exactly that reason. Just to stimulate, once again, this notion that, yes, girls, women can be great scientists, can be great mathematicians, et cetera, et cetera.
Wow, that's fantastic.
There is no endeavor that we think of as a contest. No, where you wouldn't put your best team on the floor. Right. There's no place, no other, where you'd leave half the talent out of the pool, or you discriminate against them in incentives or any of that stuff. So this was not, the main thing we want to say here is there's not a person in this book, including the assassin, who is not superbly qualified to do what he or she is doing. And it's really important.
Right. I do, Jim, we're last 10 minutes, but I particularly because I got you here. How do you get to be Jim Patterson? Who inspired you? Who encouraged you? Who sort of took you in your small town and said, hey, actually, kid, you can write, or you can't, and here's how to do better?
Yeah, I think there's a little similarity here. My grandmother.
Is that right?
She was the one who said, you can be anything. She did say you're not going to play in the NBA, which really hurt my feelings. But she was the one that just said you can do anything. And I didn't get the same support from my parents, who were a little more conservative in terms of what was possible. But she pushed. And then when I went to graduate school at Vanderbilt, and there was one professor there. It was kind of interesting because couldn't have been more conservative, and I was kind of this long-haired hippie in those days. I had long hair; it was so nice. And he just took me and he said, "You can write. You can do this." So those two people in particular.
That's fantastic. This is terrific, Mr. President. Will there be a sequel?
Well, I'm an old dog, and this is a new trick for me. So, it depends on whether people like it and people take it seriously. I had a wonderful time, and I learned a lot. I felt like I got a tuition-free university education in creative writing. So if we can think of a worthy project and the public likes this book, maybe, but let's see how this does first.
We're enjoying this. I mean, it's been a great process. Coming out and meeting everybody has been terrific. We've loved these. This is the fourth, I think, speech we've given, and they're really fun. So everything, we're just having fun with it. Going to Arkansas.
Yeah, we're going to Arkansas tomorrow.
From here to Arkansas. And the initial run is 1.2 million copies. You're on pace to meet or exceed the world record for first weeks in America.
So far, we're ahead of the game. So far, so good.
Yeah, so far, so good. And I'm told there's going to be a mini-series adaptation. Are you allowed to talk about that?
Yeah, no, Showtime.
Showtime, okay.
I'll tell you, it was a lot of fun to go out to Hollywood because we had, I think, 17 suitors that came. There's some studios and TV networks and whatever. And ultimately, we decided on Showtime. And, because we both love cable and what they do. And the fact that they can do this over 8 or 10 episodes and really make it, once again, very realistic, get the best writers. So we're pumped about the possibilities there.
And, Mr. President, do you get to cast the lead here? Do you get to pick who plays President Jonathan Lincoln Duncan?
No, but I hope I can have enough veto power that if they pick somebody that doesn't fit the character, I could fix that. But I don't care.
We want a good actor.
We want a good actor.
We have a good actor for the audio.
Yeah. Dennis Quaid read the audio. And he did a really good job, I think. And you just want somebody who's credible. I think in this we try to write this book so that the more real it is, the more thrilling it is. And you will have to decide if we did it.
What other books from your co-author should we all run out and read?
I love I've read all the Alex Cross books and all the Michael Bennett books, but he's got, and I like the Black Book, which he thinks is the best book he's written in 25 years, and I agree. But he's got a new character named Harriet Blue, who is, I think you've written 2 of those books, right?
Yep.
And she's an Aussie cop, an Australian cop, whose brother is wanted for murder, and who had a really tough life and still has a tough life. And it is gripping. You feel, particularly if you've ever spent any time in Australia, I mean, or if you haven't, you'll learn a lot about Australia, but it is fascinating. I like her.
In a lot of ways, I think the best books I do are my kids' books, honestly. Yeah. The middle school book.
The Big Word book. What's the name of the book you and Sue did?
That I did with Sue, Big Words for Little Geniuses, for little kids. It's an alphabet book, but with big words.
I promise you there are words in that book you won't know. Or at least there were words in the book I didn't know.
Well, and
great book.
Lissa referred to it somewhat in the introduction, Jim, but people should know, you just donated to for the latest piece of philanthropy, $3 million to the University of Florida for reading programs and encourage more reading. That's fantastic.
The Florida program, to me, and that's what I like to do. I like to, and obviously the president has done that with his foundation, to really maximize whatever we do. And in Florida, the percentage of kids reading at grade level is 43%.
Wow.
And well, you know what? But the tops in the country is 62% at Massachusetts. So nobody's doing terribly well. University of Florida's developed a program up around Gainesville. They have it up into the mid-80s. It's a great program. It goes right at teachers in a sane, constructive way. We went to the state legislature about 2 months ago, and they've given us 2 counties, and they said if you get in the 70s, we will put this right through the state. So we think we can get Florida.
That's fantastic. Thank you.
As you know, it's been some years since I was actively involved in, education K through 12, but I spent a lot of time when I was president, and it was one of my main jobs, maybe my main job when I was governor. But one of the things that we learned is that one of the big reasons for school dropouts is that past the 8th grade, if you don't have a high level of reading comprehension, you can't do the math or the English. And people get bored and they quit. And it's very important, the kind of programs he does are very important, especially because we still have the shortest school year of any advanced country except for Belgium. And
How do you know how long the Belgian school year is, sir? I don't mean to be impertinent, but who the hell knows that?
I do.
It's impressive.
I tell everybody, I was in politics a long time, and it's the only profession where people are surprised if you know anything. You wouldn't go to a doctor who didn't know the difference in a liver and a lung. I mean, it's crazy. But anyway, something else he does that I think is really important is to supplement independent bookstores, to give them more money so they can pay good employees and do that. That's really important. And the reason that's important is one thing parents, even parents with hardly 2 nickels to rub together, will still spend money on are books for their little children. To have, and therefore, if an independent bookstore can get started and get a toehold, the children's book section is normally their best profit center. Because people love their kids, and they're not dumb, they want to help their kids. So I want to thank him for that too, because it's a kind of a force multiplier for all the other wonderful things he does.
Well, I think the hard thing is getting parents to understand that it's their job to get their kids reading, not the school's job. It's their job.
Interesting. Yeah. So Jim, as we wrap up, what did you learn about one of the most famous men in the world by spending a year writing a book with him?
Honestly, and I don't mean to embarrass the president, I went in feeling very good about him, but you start thinking, and you deal with him as much as I've dealt with him, He's an unbelievably good human being who has tried his best to devote his whole life to making this a better country and to making people have better lives in this country.
And Mr. President, what did you learn about Jim? You don't have to save everything for the eulogies now. You can go ahead and say good things about Jim right to his face.
Well, first of all, you know, I love the way he writes these books. And I love these. I'm like everybody else. I like a fast ride, you know. But he's a deep man. And there's a method to his madness, the way he does everything. He doesn't do anything by accident. And he really cares. And, you know, if you make a certain amount of money, it's like an athlete. You know, you got to have a foundation or you got to give some money away and all that stuff. This guy, nobody has, I don't believe, given any more books out, targeted what he does more carefully. And now, when he found something that worked, this Florida program, trying to make it big enough so that if it gets in enough schools and it produces the results, everybody else in America will have to follow this. And that's a big deal. And, you know, so I think honestly, when he said, you know, the children's books are his most favorite things, he's written a book with his son, wrote this wonderful book about long words. I promise you should get it. It'll embarrass you. With his wife, he cares more about that, excuse me, than anything. And I like working with somebody who's thinking about the future, who cares more about whether children have a better future than anything else. And the older I get, the more I get oriented toward the future, especially after I became a grandfather. This guy could have done anything he wanted with his money, and he could have done something that would look good and not really cut much of a wide swath. He's investing in things that actually have a chance to change the trajectory of young people's lives in this country. And I love that.
Wow, that's fantastic. I want to thank...
I told you he was a good storyteller.
He is a magnificent storyteller, as are you, sir. I want to thank Politics and Prose, Lissa Muscatine and Brad Graham. Thank you so much for hosting us here. Thank you all for coming, and thank Jim Patterson, President William Jefferson Clinton.
Thank you all.
Thank you all very much. Go Caps!